Previously on the Embracing the Journey podcast.
What is being a father like?
For me, it's a mix of like joy and complete terror almost every day.
When I was sitting in the waiting room before she was born, I hear the nurse say, "John, are you ready?" And you're like, "Am I ready for what?" And then the phone just hung up.
She looked at me and was like, "Champ, it's time to scrub in." Now, I am a champ, right? But only one of us went to Harvard to do this. So I had no idea she was talking to me. So I turn around and look behind me and I'm like, who are you talking to?
Welcome back to Embracing the Journey podcast. So for those who are out there that are tuning in, they don't know about our story. They don't know the things that we were up against. They don't know how we got to where we are. And you being the older brother of the family, I have a feeling that you have a better memory to most things than the rest of your younger brothers, myself included. So at your comfort level, let's open that door for you to get some things said that maybe are misconceptions
Right.
of who you are and why you do the things that you do at the level that you do it at.
I think we were born during the crack epidemic. So that played a huge part in it. I think the family that we were born into are some of the smartest people who've ever existed, some of the hardest working people who've ever existed. But I think there was a concerted effort to disenfranchise that ended up impacting us pretty severely. When you hear rappers talk about, the trap house and these kinds of things, I can tell immediately who was really there and who wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Our house was the trap house. Like, I think about what I'm saying.
Right.
When your house is the trap house, when you live there and you sleep there and you eat there, it's a different situation. So yeah, unfortunately for me, my memory is great. I remember everything, but I think it's informed so much of who I am today. And I usually am my concern is never for if I'm going to make it or if you're going to make it. My concern is for the people who are pretending to want it, getting in the way.
Right.
When you decided to do sports, I don't even know if you remember that conversation. I literally was like, pick one and let's go pro. It wasn't like, let's try, I knew it was going to happen because there was no other choice. And in moments when I feel discouraged, my mind took me back to 3 little boys sharing a bed, 2 at the foot, 1 at the head, running extension cords to the neighbors' houses. Mark Hendricks was the director of our Boys and Girls Club.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew about our situation. And he used to let us come there and, take our showers, do our homework and all of that. But he used to let us take clothes out of the lost and found. You remember that?
I do.
There was a boy named, I won't say his real name, but we called him Ducky. You remember with the web feed.
Right.
Shout out to Duck. I know he didn't mean this. I know he was just having a bad day and he was repeating things that he heard grown-ups say. But we had a bunch of clothes on from the lost and found that we had washed and we were wearing. And I remember him being like, "Yo, why you got my clothes on, you bum?" And that was the day I knew it was on. I knew whatever needed to be done, we were going to do it because I was like, we're never going to have that moment again. So I think you're forged in the fire that you are kind of reared in. So I've never been concerned about whether or not we were going to make it. I think we were lucky in that we had a mother who knew what she didn't know. So she surrounded us.
Mm-hmm.
You think about, we lived on a daily basis. I was interacting with an international chess champion. You were interacting with the woman who graduated top of her class at Yale. We had Gus, who was a lawyer and an engineer at Boeing. We had all of these people feeding our minds with stuff that wasn't our surroundings, what we was growing up in, on top of what we were learning from our direct family, which was how to hustle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our family's gotten it out the mud everywhere we've been. So I think those two things together, along with some luck, and I think a little divinity, because what are the chances that a bunch of kids from low income housing from the projects are gonna interact with, you know, like we grew up with Paul Giamatti. What is the statistical probability that 3 kids living in the projects with living in a station wagon at one point,
Right.
but the projects with no water, no electricity, no food, end up with Paul Giamatti in their like daily, weekly,
As their godfather.
as their godfather. Like, so I think we got lucky in terms of that, but I think a lot of it was divinity. So these days I'm never worried about, like, you're supposed to be here. You know what I mean? When I walked in the building and saw Frederick Films on the door, like, I teared up because there was one place we lived, we didn't even have a door.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, we literally didn't have a door. There was one place we lived where every time a neighbor would flush their toilets, sewage would come out of the floor. So I'm like,
And this is all stuff I don't remember at all.
thank God you don't remember it.
We'll be right back. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break.
Genius. What makes you different makes you great.
Embrace your punch.
Welcome back, everybody, to Embracing the Journey podcast.
You know, thank God you don't remember it. But we had a solid group of adults around us that saw the potential. And then we had a solid group of guys in the neighborhood. Because you think about where we come from has produced more NBA players, NFL players, and famous entertainers than anywhere else in the Pacific Northwest. I don't think that's by accident. I think there was a lot of culture there that we were able to take advantage of. There was a lot of bad stuff too, but I've never been worried. I've always been worried about the people who get in the way because I know they don't want it as bad as we do.
Right.
And that kind of hunger can alienate a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, so when I look at something like Embrace the Journey, that's literally, I think, how we got here was embracing the journey, not getting discouraged, not giving up on ourselves, but being able to tap into those moments. Because even if you don't remember the details, I know that, like, without knowing anything about what's going on at your house right now, I know your refrigerator is filled to the point of gluttony.
Oh, for sure.
Because we never had that. You know, there's times when I got to explain to my wife, she's like, yo, like, we're good on groceries. I'm like, no, we're not. We're not good. I need it. I need all of it. And now being a father, I'm trying to keep that at bay, but I'm so set on my daughter having not everything I didn't, but everything she needs to be happy and healthy and thrive. And like, I think when I look at this, when I see your name on buildings and, you know, LLC and, you know, all of the great work you're doing for the community, I think it was supposed to happen like that. We were supposed to bump into Mark. We were supposed to bump into Alicia. We were supposed to bump into Ray Butler and Gus Lindsay and Maggie Everett and Paul Giamatti and Sarah Smith and all of these people so that we could do everything we needed to do in the world, but always have the perspective that we got to give back.
Right.
Because I know there are people who are going to look at what you're doing and what, you know, American Licorice is doing. I don't think they know how deep this is for us.
Not at all.
You know, giving back and wanting to lift people up. Because if it weren't for Mark letting us take showers at the Boys and Girls Club and people like Alicia, you know, bringing food by the house, and like, you know, we had people dress up like Santa Claus in the middle of summer to bring us food.
I remember that.
You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of people who helped us along the way that now we're able to help. It's natural for us. Yeah, of course.
How close, and again, you would know this more than any of us, how close were we to not being who we are today, to being the statistic that we were actually supposed to be?
I mean, I can name at least 5 situations where we probably shouldn't have survived it, just off the top of my head. It'd be tough to tell those stories. I don't know if Mom would be cool with that, but I would say, if close in terms of distance or time, I'd say 1 second at any point in time, because the people around us who didn't have our perspective didn't make it. You know what I mean? Like, I won't say their names, but 3 guys we grew up with are serving life sentences. They're never coming home. You look at some of the pitfalls other people have had with their success, you know, the scandals and getting caught up in, you know, all these things. Like, for the most part, we've been able to avoid that. And in one family from low-income housing, we get Olympians, you know, football players, pilots, scientists, university instructors. There's no way, you know, that happened without it being a part of some larger plan. So I think even now, success is scary, you know. Having resources is scary, and there are a lot of people who get it and don't know how to deal with it. So they go back to the neighborhood and they do things that push them closer to the brink of destruction.
Right.
Like, when we go back to the neighborhood, it's not to be hard and prove a point. When we go back to the neighborhood, it's to inspire, and I think we get that love back. Like, we're not getting robbed. We're not getting, you know.
There was a while when I would go play basketball at Green Lake, and that demographic down there is like drug abusers, alcoholics, like anything under the sun. And they would never do any of that when I was around. They wouldn't even light up a cigarette when I was around. Yeah. And I heard one person say, I'm not going to be the fall of Norris Frederick.
Straight up. We had a lot of good dudes, a lot of good street dudes and street girls, you know, that kept us on the straight path. I think Lewis was a big influence in that regard. You know, Lewis, he kept the streets away from us. I don't know if you remember Lewis, Giroux's brother.
Yeah.
He kept, like, he looked out for us a lot. There were guys who, you know, helped and didn't have to help. There were drug dealers who paid for us to go to basketball camp. Drug dealers who paid for track camp, you know, paid for school supplies. There were prostitutes who paid for dinner some nights. Like,
I was unaware of all of this, huh?
We were fortunate. You just saw them as like uncle this, or cousin that. You know, they wasn't cousins or uncles. They were just people who saw that we needed help and helped. Like, Alicia is a great example. She wasn't a street person, like, but what would make a Yale graduate on her way up come to hell to help us?
Was it actually hell?
Boy, I think it was as close as you can get to hell on earth. You know, I think it was as close as you can get, because we're not talking about, I don't even know how deep you want to go. I'm trying to keep it PG. I think in a lot of ways it was normal for the neighborhood.
Right.
But when we came home, you know, we didn't have resources, but we still had each other. You know, I think you can be, like, some people are so poor all they have is money.
Right.
I don't believe we were ever poor. We just didn't have money. We always had our brains. We always had our books. We always had, you know, we had like 7-month Monopoly games.
I remember
where
that.
Thought we were playing Monopoly, but what we were actually learning is exactly what we're doing now, because we own our homes, right? We use that. You got a whole office, and you think about the way we played Monopoly in the house, and it looks a lot like what you're doing right now as an adult.
Sure.
So we were learning a lot of lessons. I don't know if you remember, like, Big Norris's game, where if you could tell him how much change he was supposed to get back before the teller did, you got to keep the change.
I remember that.
Like the way we used to coupon every Sunday, cutting up coupons, and anything you got from the coupons, anything you saved was yours. Like, things like that are why we're here today. So, you know, we had a lot of bad things, but we also had a lot of good things, a lot of good people around us. I don't know if the people who say they want it as bad as they think they do.
So I was like, at night, I think that's when I do like my best thinking, right? Where it's hard for me to sleep at night because there's so many things going through my head. And the one thing that is constant for the past 20-something years is there's no room to fail. And I don't mean fail as in like trying something and not succeeding. I mean fail as like giving up on myself or allowing someone else to dictate my narrative. So when I've started like certain businesses, I've heard individuals say like, oh, that's not going to work out for you. Or that's a stupid thing. I wouldn't do that. The market's oversaturated. But once I get my feet wet in it, all of a sudden things start to move. And then these same individuals come back telling me like, oh, I knew you were going to do it, man. Look at you. You were like this in high school, or you were like this in college. So when you're talking about like certain things that we've had to overcome and people not understanding how bad we actually want something, like that hits a little different, because I constantly feel in the spaces that I am in that I'm not doing enough, that I'm not as successful as everybody paints this picture for me to be. So my question to you as my older brother, is that like me not wanting to be comfortable in the spaces that I am, that I'm always like, no, I can do a little bit more, or I need to work a little bit harder? What would you think?
I deal with that too. I think it's a combination of like, it's a trauma response, but I also think it's a little bit of survivor's guilt. You know what I mean? Like, I feel it. Every time I put money on one of the homies' books, every time I travel to a new place, every time there's a new accomplishment, like, bro, I got a whole food deal, right, that I haven't even announced yet. I have a whole dog food deal for Redemption Road Canine that I haven't even announced yet, just because at what point is it bragging?
Right.
At what point is it throwing it in people's faces? So I think the survivor's guilt, and then just the food insecurity thing, right? Needing to make sure that there is food everywhere in my house. I mean, you've been in my house.
Right.
Everywhere. I got 4 refrigerators. 5 if you count the dog. I got 5 refrigerators and they're all full. I think it's a trauma response. You definitely, like, we have to work through that, because it'll never be enough. It'll never be enough, but it's already enough. I think for me, the biggest thing is when I start spiraling like that, that's when I go look at my daughter. You know, that's when I'll go grab a dog. Like, when I think about my life, I don't actually enjoy it as much as I probably should. I'm sure you're the same way.
For sure.
Like, for dudes who lived in 470 square feet, 4 people, sometimes 20 people, depending on the night. We got movie theaters, private lakes, this year's cars, multiple cars. Like, you walk into your house and it's the last 25 years of success in Washington State. You got medals from everything. Somewhere, some coach is applying for a job using the medals that you earned to get that job.
Right.
Facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere, somebody's receiving a royalty check that they're using to pay their bills based on a song that I wrote. Somewhere, somebody's training a dog, saving a dog's life, changing a person's life, a family's life. Something is happening somewhere in the world that's dog related that is a direct result of what we've done. So I think just taking a moment to kind of to be grateful for me is, and like when I'm spiraling, I'll go look at my daughter and be like, thank you. You know, to whatever's out there, to whoever's out there, thank you. And then I kind of go through and try to be specific about what I'm thankful for. And I'll say it. I'm thankful for my brothers. I'm thankful for my mother. I'm thankful for my dogs. I'm thankful for the food that I have. I'm thankful for the birds, the bees. Like, I'm thankful for that lake and that there's fish in it. Like, I just try to go that path, because I understand what you're saying. I don't really sleep that well at night. Sometimes I even miss the sirens and the craziness.
Right, because it was comfortable.
Yeah, like, civilian life is strange.
Next week on the Embracing the Journey podcast.
This entrepreneurship world that I live in, it's not as hard as I expected it to be.
Oh, ain't nobody trying to kill you. FBI ain't kicking in no doors. Ain't no DEA.
Right.
Ain't no ATF. And like, even if you have a bad day, right? A bad day in our old life, you're not making it home.
Mm-hmm.
A bad day here, like, go home and take a shower and we try again tomorrow. Success is not things. Success for me now is being a great father, being a great husband, being a better brother, being a better son,